John Stanfa was born on December 7, 1940, in a region of western Sicily long dominated by the Mafia. In 1964 Stanfa came to the US with his wife, and they eventually moved to Philadelphia. He was registered as a stonemason and bricklayer by trade. When Stanfa arrived in the US, his brothers and brother-in-law, who were made men in the Gambino organization, introduced him to the family. The Gambino family leaders arranged for Stanfa to work for Angelo Bruno, the boss of the Philadelphia crime family. When Bruno was later murdered, Stanfa was in the seat next to him. Rumors were that Stanfa was in on the plot. When questioned, he refused to talk, and on May 14, 1980 he was indicted on perjury charges. In 1981 Stanfa was sentenced to 8 years in prison for lying to the grand jury. In the meantime, Philip Testa got murdered, and a new boss took over, Nicodemo Scarfo. In 1987 Stanfa got out of prison and for the next several years kept a low profile. At that point Anthony Piccolo was acting boss but eventually wanted to step down. With the Gambino family and Genovese family backing, Stanfa became the new boss. Piccolo would become his consigliere, and eventually 33-year-old Joseph Joey Ciancalini Jr. would become underboss. Stanfa put in place the street tax, which created tension and threats of violence on the streets of Philadelphia. Stanfa would send Felix Bocchino to collect the tax until he was eventually murdered in 1992. The media called it the first mob hit in 7 years. Both Stanfa and the FBI had no clue as to who was behind the murder, but pretty soon things became clear. In South Philadelphia there were a group of young thugs who didn't feel connected to the new administration. The young gangsters were led by Joseph "Skinny Joey" Merlino. They already had the street tax in place, and so when Bocchino came around collecting what they felt was their money, he had to go. The Bocchino hit would be the first casualty in the war between the young mobsters and the old-school Cosa Nostra gangsters. Pretty soon Stanfa found out about the Young Turks, as they would later be called, and took action, which led to a botched hit on Merlino's second-in-command Michael Ciancalini. When asked about the murder attempt, Michael kept his mouth shut and said he didn't know anything. In the meantime, Stanfa decided he could use some new blood, which was 2 young gangsters from Italy named Biagio Adornetto and Rosario Bellocci. By the fall of 1992, Stanfa began to plot the demise of the Merlino faction. The 2 mobsters that Stanfa had inducted into his family started making moves for his daughter. One was rejected by her, and this would set the stage for another botched hit. Soon Stanfa decided it was time to get rid of Merlino, and thought going to war with him was the easiest solution. In 1992 Stanfa's underboss Joey Chang was the target of a botched hit in his social club. Merlino would later make some contacts in prison. His cellmate was Ralph Natale, a 64-year-old Bruno family member. Natale would be out on parole in 2 years, and would be a serious rival to Stanfa. Natale had ties to New York, that would like to see Stanfa go. August 5, 1993, in a drive-by shooting, Merlino and second-in-command Michael Ciancalini were shot. Ciancalini was dead, but Merlino ended up surviving. Stanfa was high on the success of the drive-by shooting and got careless, which led to August 31, 1993, while he was driving to work with his son Joe and his driver, they drove into an ambush. Stanfa's driver got away from the ambush and managed to escape with Stanfa and his wounded son. Joe would survive, but this attempt led to Stanfa wanting the entire Merlino faction wiped out. 2 Merlino associates were killed, and Merlino and his top associates went underground. On November 15, Merlino was sent back to jail for violating his parole. Stanfa had some problems of his own at this time. He discovered he had an informant among his family. On March 17, 1994, Stanfa and 23 top associates were indicted on racketeering charges. The FBI had Stanfa bugged from the early weeks of his reign as boss. The entire war and mob business were caught on tape by the FBI. The Joey Chang hit was even videotaped. This, along with the informers and future informers, would bring the entire family down. Stanfa knew his time was up, and in late 1995 John Stanfa was sentenced to 5 consecutive life sentences. Stanfa is currently serving his time at the Federal Medical Center in Ayer, Massachusetts. Please like, comment and subscribe.